No, she knew what he meant to do by taking her hands. It was their ceremony for marriage. The consent of two individuals to be together. And she wasn't ready for that. But she also knew it would give him extra abilities to protect her. Maybe even be able to take her from the room like he had done when he had left the ball. He gave her a significant look and said, "Then take mine." He was offering himself to her rather than the other way. She wasn't any more pleased with this turn of events. People shouldn't own others. She hesitated. She knew why he wanted to do it. They're things dragons could do if you were in their collection. Maines got testy and hissed, "I don't have all day. There is a schooner waiting for me and I will not miss it because you two lovebirds have some cryptic goodbye to enact." Victor gave her a significant look. She said, "I'm going to undo this as soon as I can. I wouldn't expect anything less." She took the hands he offered. When nothing happened straight away, she asked, "Victor. Wait. I hear it takes time and commitment if there is a limb missing." Her heart dropped. Because she had a metal hand instead of a real hand, there was a chance this magic of dragons wouldn't work. Or was it because she didn't really want to be married? Before she could make any more plans to maybe throw herself at Maines and try to fight him for the gun, pain ran up her arms. Brands etched in delicate curls and patterns to show a scene of two dragons wrapped around each other. There was a screech as the brand covered her metal hand as well. Maines gasped, "What is this?" He got nervous and pulled the trigger on his flintlock. The bullet hit her shoulder, knocking her back. But Victor was still holding her and twisted her around and away from Maines. Maines pulled the trigger on his second flintlock. Victor jerked as the bullet hit him. But she wasn't too worried as dragons were notoriously robust creatures. Victor's eyes still held life as he looked down at her. He lay a hand over her shoulder where she had been hit and the wound no longer pained her. There was then a blue flash. Her stomach fell out from under her as she went from being in the world to being somewhere completely different. Air was ripped out of her lungs and burned. It was a moment before she was standing behind Maines. She gasped for breath which hitched and burned its way back into her lungs. Victor gave her a look, asking silently if she was all right. She nodded though she could see the pain in his own eyes from his own wound. Maines spun but Victor was already moving. Knocking the one flintlock out of his hand and slamming his hand into Maines' face. Maines cried out with pain, stumbling back. He pulled another flintlock and shot blindly. The bullet pinged as it ricocheted off her hand. That got her moving. Not willing to further damage her hand by using it to punch someone, she grabbed a vase off a side table and smashed it over Maines' head. Victor grabbed the now stunned Maines and slammed his head into his knee. Maines collapsed backwards, unconscious. Victor stumbled back and with a groan went to one knee. She asked concerned, "Victor?" He held up a hand. In a moment, the blood that had run down his back stopped flowing. She shifted the cloth aside where the bullet had pierced the cloth and made a hole. The wound was pink with a healing scar. She asked, "The bullet?" "Dissolved. Same as your own." She helped him to his feet as he was still a bit wobbly. She said with some awe in her voice, "That is one neat trick." He caught her mechanical hand. There was a dent where the bullet had ricocheted. He frowned and rubbed it with his thumb. The plate popped as it returned to its flattened form. I didn't know it would do that," he said with a frown creasing his forehead. "Do what?" Rain asked. He looked into her eyes. "It is harder to manipulate metal. I shouldn't be able to fix your hand so easily." He turned it over to show the etched brand on the metal. He pushed up her sleeve to where the mechanical hand joined with her skin. The brand moved seamlessly from her skin to the metal. "It really is a part of you." "That is the only answer. The brand saved my life." Or at least a long time of recovery from the bullet wound in her shoulder. There was a tense silence. Maines groaned and they realized that everything wasn't finished. A curtain sash became a rope to tie up the disgraced peeler. He didn't come to right away but groaned a little more as they moved his arms into a position so they could tie him up. Victor said, "You know you can break the bond now if you want. Later. Let's get this cad in gaol and then we can tie up loose ends." Chapter 24. Larkin hung the frame on the wall. He stepped back to admire his handiwork. Rain was reading through the letters that had arrived on her desk. All addressed to Lady Goldenhand. Some gushed over how amazing they thought she was, while others asked for her to talk on their behalf with Victor. There were the occasional one that vilified her as a demon for daring to do anything besides marry and have children with a dragon, but those all ended in the bin beside her. Larkin said, "He did a good job." She looked up at the article he had framed. It was one from the Times and written by Thomas Barnes. The heading announced that Lady Goldenhand had taken down a rotten peeler. She didn't like the title, but she was getting used to the name. At least with the commoners, they didn't mean the name ironically and instead spoke it with reverence. She still wasn't sure what to do with that. At least Thomas had made it impossible for the government to use her as a scapegoat for Maine's misdeeds. The execution had taken place yesterday. This time it hadn't been public. Charles Rowan had decided the quieter it happened the better. Hopefully, the newspapers would find some other story and society would titter over another scandal. Fields interrupted by rapping his knuckles on the doorframe. He had taken Maine's position, though he wasn't pleased about it. Throwing a folder on the desk, he said, "You are going to be writing up your own reports from now on, Ancaster." He nodded to Larkin and left. Rain let out the breath she had been holding, and when Larkin raised an eyebrow she said, "What?" "I was worried he was going to yell at me." "He likes you." The smile on his lips also evident in his voice. She snorted at the idea and picked up the folder. It was the notes on Sebastian's case. It was woefully incomplete because the last time she had updated was with Maine's after she had discovered who the ring had belonged to. There had been several other murders and the conclusion of Maine's trial to put into the notes. Larkin sat down. "I'm serious. He treats all of us like that." She would believe him, but grateful that Larkin would still be working with her and could play interference with Fields if she needed it. Another knock on the doorframe had them both looking up. Victor leaned on the doorframe. Larkin coughed and said, "I'm going to get some tea." "You want any?" She nodded and he slipped past Victor. Victor waited until he was sure that Larkin wouldn't overhear him when he said, "I'm still branded." I know." She shuffled the papers aside so she could bring her attention to Victor. "I thought you were going to divorce me." He settled on the edge of the desk. "I'm still thinking about it." He glanced through the doorway to make sure there weren't any other peelers close by before he closed the gap between them. He caught up her hands, kissing the knuckles of both. "Take your time." His eyes hot. "Also, I came in to tell you I have a new job." She caressed her hand over his arm and asked, and what is that?" "I'm going to be the forensic scientist for the yard. Charles has set me up a laboratory here in the building. I'll be able to see you every day." She frowned and asked, "Is that even a position?" "I didn't know we hired scientists." His grin reminded her that he liked to tease. "Oh, they do now." He must have made a deal with Uncle Charles to get this position. She pulled back a little and said, "You can't interfere with my work." His voice a purr. "I wouldn't dream of it." When he went to leave, she tightened her hands on his and tugged on them so he would come close again. He flashed a grin that was hotter than expected as he leant down and kissed her. Sitting back, he eventually broke the kiss. She was flushed as she let go of his hands. He blew her a kiss as he left her office. She shook her head and went back to her letters. This one wasn't addressed to Lady Golden Hand but instead to herself. Frowning, she opened it. It was from her brother. She hadn't seen him this morning when she had left for work, but that wasn't unusual. Her parents' house in Londinium was large. Everett liked to sleep in and she started early. She bit her lip as she read the letter. Dear Rain. My favorite sister. You are probably wondering why I'm writing a letter when I could just find you after dinner or over breakfast, but while you are reading this I am on a ship to the continent. I'm going to learn from Jasmine how to make limbs like your own. Just like you, I'm tired of not having a purpose, so I am going to find one. Please tell the parents. I couldn't tell them to their face as I was worried Mother would somehow make me change my mind. Love, Everett. She had to smile over the last line. He would have seen the arguments her mother and her had when she had decided to be a police officer. One thing about her mother. Once she had made up her mind, her mother had supported her all the way. Closing the letter, she placed it back into the envelope. She put in her desk away from the slew of letters from newfound fanatics. Her parents would ask about it, but it was better if they didn't see it. Her mother would be hurt to think he hadn't said goodbye properly because of her, but she would get over it.